going to be talking about settings and custom fields today. So I hope you're all ready. We're going to take about an hour today. And a few things I like to mention as well. I try to break this class up into two 30-minute halves. So the first half I go over kind of the general settings portion, and the second half, second 30 minutes, I will spend on custom fields. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about settings. It's all housed under this settings gear icon on the left-hand side of your screen. Starting with this class, I like to mention as well that you must be an admin user in Bloomerang to get behind settings. So if you are a standard user and you're listening to this class today, no problem at all. You just notice that when you click on the settings icon, you'll probably get a warning message that says you don't have access to that area. If you find that after this class today you believe that you do need access to settings in Bloomerang, feel free to talk to somebody in your organization who's already an admin, and if you're not sure who that is, you can always ask support. We could point you in the right direction. And whatever works best for your organization, they can always switch your permissions if they see fit. I'm going to go ahead and click on the settings icon, and the first thing we're going to see is kind of our most commonly used settings, or bookmarks tab, if you will. So we've created a list of what we believe to be the most commonly used settings. There are some settings we'll go over today that you'll kind of set up one time, and after that you may not really mess with again. But these ones, we find that a lot of our customers are going to them more often than others, so we've created them here as a quick access link. Today we're going to be working off of the View All Settings page. You're going to be able to find all of these settings there as well. And for today's purpose, since we're going through all settings, it's kind of a nice way to kind of go through, I guess, the different sections of the settings. To kick off our class today, we're going to start with My Organization. So it's kind of that little description that it had below explains it, but it's just the general settings for your organization. So it's going to ask things like your organization name, email, phone number, and address, as well as other items. But you may be wondering, why does Bloomerang want to know all of this? Well, it's good to know what your organization goes by, of course. Email, it's good. For a few different reasons. You'll find that a lot of general settings are used in multiple places throughout the database. So for example, your email, your phone number, and your address are all used to help with deliverability settings when sending mass email. It tells your constituents' email that your mass emails are valid, not spam mass emails being sent to them. And it verifies that you are an actual organization with an address and a way to reach you if your constituents wish to do so. Another area specifically where email is used if you use our online forms, whether that's an online donation or event registration form, or if it's an email sign-up form or something like that. You have the ability to get notifications via email each time somebody fills out one of those forms. By default, whatever this email is listed here will receive one of those notifications. So a lot of times people will put like a info at your organization's name, .co or com or org or whatever the case may be. We're also using this general information at the bottom of your email footer. So if you send out mass emails through Bloomerang, on the footer you'll see your organization's information, including your address and your website, and a phone number to reach you. It's just a good way. One, it does help with that email deliverability and verification that you're a legitimate organization, but also it's easy access for your constituents to be able to reach you if they need to. Next, there's website, like I mentioned before, and then there are social media, our social media section here. So Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all areas to put in your social media handles if your organization uses those platforms. Excuse me. And the area that Bloomerang uses these the most at the moment is through mass email. So if you fill out the organization settings here for your social media pages, you will be able to add in these icons in your mass email. So if you're sending out a newsletter and at the bottom you want to enter, hey, click here to follow us on Facebook or Twitter or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, if you have this filled out, you'll easily be able to insert those icons so that your constituents can visit your social media pages. Next, we're going to go through the NTEE code. That's a national tax exempt code that is designated by the IRS. This code just designates what type of organization you are, so your 501c3 designation. One way you can find this is on that paperwork, your IRS paperwork. If you're not sure, we do have a frequently asked question on our knowledge base that kind of gives you a few resources to look for your NTEE code, one of them being GuideStar. So we find that a lot of times our customers are able to find their NTEE code through GuideStar's website. And if all else fails and you're not sure, you're still having a hard time finding it, you can reach out to support. We'll see if we can find it for you. Next is the fiscal year start. So if you set up your fiscal year here in this part of Bloomerang, I would highly recommend it. It will become handy in a few different areas. So one is filtering. Filtering in reports, emails, and letters. And it's also going to be used on the dashboard. So if you're ever filtering a report, letter, or email for something like transactions given last fiscal year or this fiscal year or whatever the case might be, you will be able to easily filter for that, and it will pull based on your fiscal year start date in organization settings. Now, same for the dashboard. You'll notice as you're kind of exploring Bloomerang, there's a section on the dashboard that says raised this fiscal year. So it's going to calculate the total dollars that have been raised this fiscal year. That also is being based on this start date here. So when you start it, if you start in Bloomerang and your organization runs on a January 1st to December 31st fiscal year, it will default to that. Otherwise, if you're running on a July 1, September, whatever the case might be, you'll want to make sure you come in here and update that. Next are the API keys. So this is one of those sections of settings that I think is more nice to know where it's at if you ever need to find it. Here, these keys are going to come in handy if you ever have any custom work done, whether that's a custom connection to Bloomerang or whether you have a developer creating some sort of custom report that's pushing and pulling information from Bloomerang into another source. So if you ever have that custom work being done and somebody requests your API keys, you can come to your organization settings to find those here. Next is the accounting integration preferences. So in Bloomerang, we have a few different connections with accounting software, one of them being Aplos and the other being QuickBooks. Now, something I like to mention along this line is for QuickBooks, we're talking about the QuickBooks desktop version. And if you're disappointed to hear that, I'm really sorry. But the good news is we are working on a QuickBooks Online integration. So I'm really excited about that, and hopefully in the near future we'll see an additional option specifically for QuickBooks Online. But keep in mind, this QuickBooks version at the moment is specifically for desktop. So if you select QuickBooks here, it will turn on a few different settings where you can set up your QuickBooks accounts. You can connect those to the appropriate funds, and then you can generate an IIF file out of Bloomerang that you can then export and import into your your QuickBooks desktop version. That's this type of file that QuickBooks, the desktop version, accepts. So you're able to do that. Now, if you use the online version, you'll want to make sure you select none here, just because that's probably not going to work for you at the moment. But like I said, near future, we're working on the QuickBooks Online integration as we speak. Now, if you're looking for a little bit more seamless integration, maybe you don't have an accounting software, or maybe you're looking for a new one, Aplos is a great way to go if you don't already use them. It's a super seamless integration with Bloomerang. All you do is select that here, type in your account ID for Aplos, and select Get from Aplos. It will turn on the connection. Sorry, Karen, one moment. Let me finish this thought, and I will come back to your question about QuickBooks. Great. Okay, so for Aplos account ID, you just turn it on. The connection gets set up. And from there, it's pretty seamless. Bloomerang pushes everything to Aplos. It matches up. Very few issues on our end with Aplos in terms of how seamless it is. So if you're in the market for a new accounting integration, that's a great one. We would highly recommend it. Now, quickly, before we move on, I wanted to touch on a question here we have. And Karen asked, can QuickBooks be downloaded into Bloomerang? Good question, Karen. So it kind of depends. We have some customers who have done that in the past. It just has to, you have to make sure that your QuickBooks file is formatted in the way that Bloomerang can accept it. So I will make note of this, and I can email you after class some resources about importing. So as long as you can format your Excel spreadsheet in the appropriate way into a CSV file in a specific format for Bloomerang, then you are more than welcome to import that information into Bloomerang. And we've had some customers do it in the past, so I'll send you some more information on that process after class today. Thanks for your question. Next, we're going to move on. Yeah, sure thing. Thank you. Next, we're going to move on to database export. So the database export, oh, great. Karen, another individual in class today has done that. So good to know that that's been successful for you, Shelly. Thank you for sharing that. So next we're going to talk about database export. So the database export is kind of another nice to know where it's located type of thing in Bloomerang. So I like to preface this section with Bloomerang keeps your data very, very safe. We update and back up your data every single night for all of our customers. So every evening we pull an update or a backup from your database, and we store that in the cloud so that if anything were to ever go wrong, we would have that data secure for you to be able to do a backup if something went totally wrong with your data, whether that's an import or whatever the case might be. We keep that super safe. Now, if you ever find that you need all of your data that's in your Bloomerang database, that's no problem at all. That's what this export is here for. So you can come in, click Create New Export. It will generate a large Excel spreadsheet file that will be every single transaction, interaction, note, anything basically you've ever entered into Bloomerang. All of your constituents will be listed in these files so that you can use. Excuse me, I'm going to grab a quick drink here. Thank you. All right. So the nice thing is you can generate these as often as you'd like. But like I said, we are backing your data up every single evening, so don't feel like this is a necessary step for you to do every day unless it's just something you'd like to do. Of course. And then every single time you generate, the last download will save. So you can see I last generated my file 4 months ago. So I could go ahead and click this download, and it would be from that very day and previously all my data. But I would be missing the last 4 months of data that was entered in my database. So I'd want to make sure I clicked a new export to get all of the most recent 4 months. So just a good place to know where that data is located if you ever need it. Lastly, on this page, we have a pretty exciting new feature. So if you're new to Bloomerang, or maybe you just haven't checked out settings in a while, we have a new integration with a company called TrueGivers, and they do nightly NCOA, so National Change of Address updates in your database every single night, free of charge as long as you have a standard subscription in Bloomerang, or if you have a Grow plus TrueGivers license. So you need to either have the standard level of Bloomerang or the Grow plus TrueGivers to have access to this. If you have one of those licenses, this is free and a part of your subscription. If you are listening to this class right now and you're really interested in this feature and learning more, you can click here to learn more, and also you can always reach out to support if you have any questions about maybe what your options are of getting that added. I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but I just kind of want to show you what it looks like quickly. If you haven't activated it yet, you just click on this button. I've already activated mine, so it says View NCOA Dashboard. It'll say something a little bit different if you haven't activated it yet. And this is the TrueGivers dashboard. So it kind of shows you a lot of great things, how many records have been updated, your total dollars being saved so that you're not getting returned in wasted postage, things like that. So really great resource. I highly recommend you look into it if that's something you are interested in doing for your database. So let's go ahead and go back to our View All Settings page. Next, we're going to move on to users. So in Bloomerang, this is kind of where you manage all of your users. So the first thing I see is the list of every single user I've had in my database. You'll see a couple common themes. In blue, that means they're active. If it's grayed out, it means they're inactive or I've deactivated their account. I can click on any of these active users or deactivated users and change anything about them, whether that's their email, their permissions in Bloomerang, anything like that. But to start off, we're going to just go ahead and create a new user so we can kind of walk through the different areas that it asks for. Starting out, it'll ask for name, recommend first name, last name, just to make things easy, unless you want to go by nicknames or anything like that. Next, it will ask for a username. Now for this section, if you're unsure, we do require every username be unique for Bloomerang. So across all of our databases, your username must be unique. So sometimes maybe your most common usernames that you've used for other sites might already be taken, or maybe you just need something that's easy to remember. And in that case, we highly recommend just using your email address for your username. It tends to be super easy for people to remember. I use it myself for my demo account. So I definitely recommend that if you're not sure what to use in that section. Next, it's going to ask for your email. So in that case, it might be, I'm going to close this out so I don't get distracted. In that case, it might be the same. You can put in your work email here. It's going to be the email that sends any of your password resets to. It's going to send you a link when you first create your account to validate it. Notification emails, anything like that that has to do with your user and your Bloomerang account, those will all go to this email. The next section, and arguably the most important section of users, is the permissions. So in Bloomerang, we have two user permissions, one being standard and the other being the administrator user. Now let's talk about the standard user first. So like I said, in Bloomerang, we have one standard user, but we kind of have an extra feature of the standard user that gives you an additional option. So by default, the standard user in Bloomerang can see everything except for what's under settings. And then there are a few additional areas that they cannot configure. So they can view, but they cannot set up the configuration of that setting. And I'll walk through those in just a moment. Also, by default, this user cannot add, edit, or delete transactions. So if you're looking for the ability for maybe, I don't know, maybe you have an intern or maybe you have a volunteer who's working in your database and you don't need them to be able to add, edit, or delete transactions. You want their user to be more read-only. This would be a great user permission for them. They'll be able to view everything. They just won't be able to add, edit, or delete transactions. They'll still be able to run reports, run letters, run emails, things like that if they need to. But the transaction information will be a read-only. Maybe you just need this type of user, but you need them to be able to add, edit, and delete transactions. You can easily turn that part of the user's permissions on by just selecting this button here. So kind of two options for the standard user, either the read-only for transaction info or the add, edit, and delete transaction info part of the user. Now next, we're going to talk about the admin user. So the administrative user can see everything in Bloomerang. That means they can configure those little settings I was talking about that I'll walk you through in just a moment. They can run reports. They can view and add, edit transaction details. They can get to everything behind settings. Just about anything you need to do, the admin user can do. So let me point out really quickly a few things that the admin user can do that the standard user cannot do other than access settings. So I'm going to go to our dashboard page. The first thing is Bloomerang recently added the ability to have a custom donor retention wheel. So we have a default version, and if you're curious about what all that's considering, I can send you some information, or you can search for it in our knowledge base. But by default, we have this retention wheel. Now maybe you're wanting to exclude some funds, campaigns, appeals. Maybe you're wanting to exclude or include soft credits, things like that. You can configure a custom retention wheel, So if you click on this, select custom, and you are an admin user, you will see this settings wheel. So I can click on the settings because I'm an admin level user, and I can configure this to exclude any funds, campaigns, and appeals that I'd like. I can change the date range. Our standard default wheel runs on a rolling date range, so every day can be different depending on people who are rolling on or rolling off being retained. So you can change that to be fiscal or calendar year based if you'd prefer. And then you can choose to include soft credits if you wish in that custom donor retention wheel. So that's one thing that the admin user can do that the standard user cannot do. So something to keep in mind. The next thing is our new duplicate report and merge option. So this is a new feature we just released last week, and it's really exciting. So now if you go under your bell icon, and all of you admin users out there may have already seen this, under the bell icon you'll see how many possible duplicates you have in your database. Now if you click on this, it will show you a kind of report style version of all of those possible duplicates. So I can go in here and look at this information, decide if this is a duplicate or not. I can choose which count I want to be preferenced, things like that. Or I can say, you know, this is not a duplicate, and so I'll click not a duplicate, and now those two pairings will not appear in my listing again. So if you have more questions about that, we have a whole help documentation on it. But that is one thing that admin users have access to that standard users do not. So your standard users cannot go through the duplicate list in this way. The next item that admin users can do and standard users cannot is configure the Twitter listening hub. So if your organization uses Twitter, you can configure as an admin user by adding your Twitter handle here and setting that up, and then any hashtags that your organization uses that you want to be recognized. So when you set this up with your account and your hashtags, anytime a constituent mentions your organization in a tweet or uses one of your hashtags, those tweets will be listed here in a timeline type setting and feed that you can go through. It will also add those tweets to your constituents' timelines if they're a constituent and you've got their Twitter handle connected to their account. And then lastly, just to circle things back around, only admin users can access settings. So if I was a standard user and I clicked this settings icon, I would immediately get a warning message that I do not have access to that area. So if we go back to the new screen, now that we've kind of covered permissions, one of the last things on this page is preferences for task notification emails. So we also recently released the new feature of task notification emails, which will send you an email or notification anytime a task is assigned, anything is updated on that task, or it's overdue. So if you would like to receive those emails for tasks that are assigned to you, you can check this box so it's green. Or if you're not interested in those emails, you can uncheck that box. Sorry, here we go. All right, maybe I just need to close that out. There we go. All right, so back to that page. So you can turn on those notifications there. Now on the right-hand side of your screen is the time zone and a phone box. So for the time zone, you'll see that in Bloomerang another kind of common theme is everything that's labeled in green is required and everything in gray is optional. So for this, the time zone's required, and it is important because this is going to pull. So if you as a user were going to schedule a mass email to be sent at a specific time, that email will be sent based on your user's time zone. So if you're the one who schedules the email will be sent based on your time zone. So you'll want to make sure when you have a moment to come in here and check that you have got your user set to the correct time zone, whatever that might be, so that if you ever schedule mass emails, it goes out at the correct time. Lastly, the phone field is just a way for you to track your users' phone numbers. If maybe somebody's running late for work one day and you don't have a way to track this at the moment, you can add their phone number in here just as an easy way to find that information. As soon as I click Save, an email will be sent to my email letting me know that a user's been created and that I can verify it by a link, and I can set up my own password. So whatever email that you've listed in that email field here, we'll get those emails. If I want to change anything about an active user I have in my database, I can come in here, click on their name. I can change anything, their time zone, their their name, their email. I can send a password reset button or link and a change email address link. I can also change things like their permissions. So like I said, if you're a standard user listening to this class today and you believe that you'll need admin permissions, somebody from your organization who is an admin user can come in and easily make that change for you if necessary, and same with task emails. Now the last thing I like to mention about users in Bloomerang is we have a BCC feature. And the BCC feature means that if you are having a conversation via email with a constituent outside of Bloomerang, so maybe it's your work email, your personal email, whatever the case might be, you can BCC that email thread into Bloomerang. The standard BCC email is bcc@bloomerang.me. And the only time you're going to need to use this unique email is if you're maybe a consultant or a volunteer, or you have roles in multiple organizations that use Bloomerang. And in that case, you have a user in more than one Bloomerang database, then you would use your custom BCC email to utilize that feature so that Bloomerang knows which database to add that interaction to. So if you BCC an email thread, it will get added to that constituent's timeline as an interaction, so you can track those conversations within Bloomerang as well. If you have more questions about that, you can click here. It will take you directly to that help article. And if not, you can go to our knowledge base and search for BCC, and a lot of documentation will come up about that. If I ever need to deactivate a user, maybe they've left quickly or they put in their notice in their last days today, I can go into any user at any time and easily take away access for logging into Bloomerang by unchecking this active box and then clicking save. I can also choose to delete their user if I'd like. It is worth noting that you don't have a limit of users in Bloomerang, so you have unlimited users of any type, so whether that's standard or admin. So no need to delete unless you really want to. You can just deactivate them. It will do the same thing. So really your preference doesn't make a difference whether you delete or deactivate your users, but you do have that ability, and we'd highly recommend just keeping an eye on that, just so you only have people who need to be in your database getting access. So if we go back to View All Settings, I'm going to skip over Constituents and move on to Transactions. The Constituents settings right now is just on Custom Fields, so we'll come back to that here in just a few minutes. If I click on Transactions, we're going to see Funds, Campaigns, Appeals first. Now these three sections are very similar, so I'll start off with Funds, and we'll just go through them quickly. In Bloomerang, when you get your brand new database, you'll have 3 default funds. If you've converted and you've had a custom conversion, you may see additional funds here from your old database as well. You can always come in here and click New to create a new fund. You can enter that here. You can make that your default fund or deactivate it if you need to, and it will show up in this list. You can click on any active fund. You'll see that all of my active funds are listed in blue again. So if I go back to my list, you'll see all of my active funds. If I come over here and click All or Inactive, I'll see any of my deactivated funds grayed out, kind of like the same behavior we saw before. And same thing, I can click on any fund and I can deactivate it, change the name, or whatever I need to do there. On the right-hand side of the screen, you have the ability to sort. So maybe you have a lot of different funds. You can sort A to Z, Z to A, or you can create a custom sort by selecting Custom and then dragging and dropping your funds into a new order. So something to keep in mind there. And you can also click on one of these bubbles to see all active or inactive funds. Funds are the only required item on transactions between funds, campaigns, and appeals. So you'll always be required to enter a fund for your new transactions. Campaigns and appeals are optional. If we move on to campaigns, this has one little kind of difference between the funds and the appeals. And that is, if I click New, it will give me the ability to give my campaign a name just like before and make it inactive or active, but it will ask for a goal, a start, and end date. So you'll see that these 3 fields are optional. They're in gray. Oh, can everybody hear me? Sorry about that. Not sure what happened. Sorry, my internet must have. Okay, so sorry everybody. Let me go back really quick to campaigns. Did we hear anything about campaigns? I'll just kind of do a refresh. I know you saw my screen probably. Okay. Okay, great, Shelly, thank you. I'm going to just briefly go over campaigns really quick. Similar to funds, the only difference is that campaigns require they don't require, but they allow you to enter a goal amount, a start, and an end date. So if you would like your campaign to show up on your dashboard, which is this campaign progress bar here, if you want your campaign to show up as an option that you can see at a glance on your dashboard page, you'll want to make sure you enter a goal amount when setting it up so that it will show up on this progress bar. You can still create a campaign without a goal amount. It will still be active. It will still allow you to set up transactions. It just won't allow you, you just won't be able to see it on your dashboard. So hopefully that makes sense. For your start and end date, now those are purely for your knowledge only. So at the moment we have these fields here, but they're not going to start or end in Bloomerang your campaign. So for example, if you enter your start date today and you have an end date at the end of next month, in a couple months from now, if you're entering new transactions and you tag a transaction with that campaign, even though it's past its end date, Bloomerang's still going to allow you to do that. So just keep in mind that those two fields at the moment are for your knowledge only. And then the goal amount is what allows you to have this campaign on the dashboard at a quick glance, but it's not required. Same as before, you can see all of your active campaigns here in blue. I can change to all or inactive to see any of my deactivated campaigns in gray. At any time, I can come in here and deactivate or reactivate a campaign. I can update its goal amount or start and end date. So all of those things can be changed. Something I like to point out about funds, campaigns, and appeals is that if I come into an existing fund campaign or appeal and I change the name, it's going to change the name for every single thing that's been tagged. So every transaction you've tagged with this fund campaign or appeal is going to also reflect that name change. So just keep that in mind. If you need to create a new campaign, make sure you create a new one rather than change the name if that's kind of where you're thinking. All right. Back to transactions. And quickly we're going to go over appeals. So appeals look really similar to funds. Your list of active appeals here, you can sort. You can click on your bubbles here to see all inactive or active. You can click in an active appeal and change the name. There we go. Change the name. Deactivate it, whatever you might need to do there. You can click new in the top right-hand corner to create a new appeal. So like I said, funds are the only required out of the three for transactions, but campaigns and appeals certainly do help keep things organized when you're using the database. So if you have any questions, maybe you're not sure how to use funds, campaigns, and appeals, we have a great help document on that. And I do apologize if it sounds like I say that a lot. I just like to point out the things I mentioned today that I don't have a lot of time to talk about, but that you can learn about more on our knowledge base. So let me know if you need any help getting to those. Skip over custom fields for a moment and on to tributes. So in Bloomerang, we have a tribute section that allows you to set up section for individuals you may be collecting donations for in honor or in memory of. And so you can see, similar to before, all of my active tributes here in blue. And if I click all or inactive, you'll also see my inactive tributes grayed out here. You'll also on the right be able to see if they're in honor of or in memory of. If I click on the new button in the top right-hand corner, it allows me to create a new tribute. So I'll select the type of tribute it is, the name of that individual, and any notes about that person that I might want to keep. It also allows me to select a notificant. So the notificant is the individual who might want to receive a letter or an email in the future about all of the gifts that have been given in honor or in memory of this individual. I can also choose to deactivate a notificant, or sorry, a tribute at any time. Shelly, great question. Shelly asked if notificants have to be internal to your organization. So the notificants do not have to be internal, but something that is a good point that this brings up is that notificants must be a constituent within your database. So they must be an individual that you've created an account for in your database. They don't need to be a user or something like that. They just need to be able to be a constituent so you can find them. It's also a good way, the reason we do that, it's a good way to be able to keep that person's email or address or phone number, depending on how you're going to reach them to notify them of these gifts. You can have more than one notificant if you need, and so it's pretty seamless in that regard. Now let's look at somebody that we've already created just to kind of see what that looks like. So here I have a tribute for Jean Ridenauer. You can see that I have 2 notificants listed here and that it's still active. You can also see that the type is in memory of. At the bottom of the screen, you can see all of the transactions that have been made in honor or in memory of Jean. So you can see who made those gifts. And if I were to click on one of these, it's going to take me straight to that transaction on that constituents page. So pretty handy at a quick glance if you're needing to see that. You can also run reports on this information, so no problem at all. Another thing I like to point out about tributes is you don't need to create a new tribute if, let's say, we have Jean in here in my system as an honor of, and Jean sadly passes away, and I'm now collecting gifts in memory of Jean. I can just come into the same tribute and switch the type to in memory of. All of the historical gifts given will keep the type of in honor of and move forward with all the new transactions entered will move forward with the type of in memory of. So it keeps its designation depending on what the type is set to. No need to create a new tribute. Shelly, oh, sorry, we got a couple questions here. Let's see. Deb and Shelly, let me get back to you at the end of class just so we can move along here, but I won't forget your questions, I promise. Let's go back to settings here really quick. That's kind of all about tributes. We are building an easier way at the moment for notificant letters. And if you have any questions about how to run those at the moment in Bloomerang, feel free to reach out to support. We can walk you through that process. Lastly, on transaction settings is the transaction processors page. So if you plan on using any of our online giving forms, whether that's donation or event registration, or if you'd like to be able to process within Bloomerang, so within maybe if I'm a constituent in your account, you go into my account and I've provided a cash, check, credit card, or EFT payment, and you want to be able to process that by entering it manually, you will want to make sure you have set up with one of our transaction processors. So currently we integrate with Stripe, Moolah, which is through Authorize.net, and BluePay. The two we recommend truly are Stripe and Authorize.net, or the Moolah processor, like I mentioned. Our customers have gotten, we've heard really great feedback from those two processors, so we would recommend either one of those. The difference between the two is Stripe only accepts credit card payments, where Moolah via Authorize.net accepts credit cards and EFT or ACH payments. So if you need the EFT ACH capability, you'll want to go with the Moolah processor. And if credit cards are all you need, Stripe is what we would recommend in that case. We do have a comparison of those fees through our knowledge base as well. If you search for comparison or Stripe or Moolah, it should come up. So if you have any questions about that, you can visit there or reach out to support. In the top right-hand corner, you can select which processor you'd like to set up and click on that. A couple things will appear. It will ask for a name. That's an internal use only thing, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Whatever makes sense internally. You can activate it or deactivate it, and it will ask for your secret and publishable key. And if you're not sure or you haven't signed up, it will get you a link to sign up, or you can click here if you're not sure where to find these two keys to connect them to Bloomerang. As soon as you fill out this information and save, it will connect the two, your processor and Bloomerang, so that you can do that processing, whether it's through the forms or inside the database. All right, so now let's take a moment to talk about custom fields, and then we'll finish our session with a few additional settings. All right, so let's start with constituent-based custom fields. Now, if you're new to Bloomerang, you have a new database, maybe you didn't convert any custom fields. Let me take a drink here quickly. This page, will be blank for you, and that's okay. This is my demo database I'm working out of today, so you'll see some examples I've created over time. But to start out, Bloomerang requires that you create a new category. So first you'll click New Category. The categories serve as kind of like a file folder, if you will. So I like to kind of create these as kind of general, kind of broad broad names that I could put multiple custom fields within. If I create a category for every single field, it's not really going to help me organization-wise. So I like to create something that's helpful and will allow me to tag more than one custom field under it for organization purposes. So for today, I'm just going to add one for additional information to kind of show you what that looks like. You'll see I have one for general info, membership info. I have one for true givers. So there's some custom things you can push from true givers that are separate. Prospect management info, volunteer info, and I've even created, because I teach this class a decent amount, an area for deactivated fields that I've sorted down there. So you can see kind of some examples of maybe what I would consider good for categories. Whatever works for your organization, maybe you are collecting information for something else specific and you have multiple fields that fit under there, that's perfectly fine as well. I like to also preface with custom fields that before you add custom fields, try to kind of step back and think what you'd like to know versus what you need to know. Kind of taking a moment to think about those types of things will help you in the future so you don't have a cluttered database with a lot of custom fields that maybe aren't getting used or isn't information that you needed to have in Bloomerang. So just something to keep in mind when you're going through the custom field process. All right, so back to our custom fields here. So we've created our category, which is required first. If I have an existing category, I can go ahead and add a new field under that. But if you're starting from scratch here and you have no custom fields, no categories, that's the very first step you're going to need to take, is creating a category. Once I've created my category, I can go ahead and create my custom field. So I'm going to click New Field. It's going to ask me for a name. So the name is going to be whatever you're looking for this custom field. So today I'm going to go over an example for attributes. Maybe on this, for this field, I want to track what these different constituent attributes are. So I'll walk through that. But maybe this is a question that you need to ask and put on an online form that we don't have by default. Maybe it's something else like birth date, or I don't know, something specific to an event, whatever the case might be. You just want to put that in the name field here. So I'm going to go for attributes. I think that's maybe spelled right. There we go. So I'm going to put attributes in here. This is basically going to be internal use in my mind, so that works for me. It's going to ask me what kind of data goes in this field. So my options here are text, date, date year only, number, and currency. So for my purposes, I'm going to select text, but you have additional options if you need to enter date, or you're asking for the number of puppies and you want to enter the number, or it's a dollar amount specifically you need to enter. You have those options there. So for today, I'm going to select text for this example. It's going to ask me, how do I enter this data in this field? I'm going to click here. It's going to give me 3 options. The first one is type it in, and that means it's going to be a free form box. So if I were to select type it in, it would say attributes, and next to it, it would give me a free form text box that I could type whatever I'd like in there. Secondly, we're going to have pick one value from a list. That, if I'm going to select that option, it would allow me to, after this, it would allow me to set up a bunch of values. And then when I go to fill out this field on the profile page of a constituent, it will only allow me to select one value from that list. Similarly, the next option is pick multiple values from a list, which is the same type of thing. It allows you to create a set list of values. You can have as many as you'd like. And then out of that list, you can pick all, none, some, whatever best fits your constituent. So for today's attributes example, I'm going to select pick multiple values from a list. The only other option on this page, it asks me if I want this field to be required. So required truly means required. So if I select required in this case and I save it, it's going to be required each time I edit a profile page on a constituent. It's going to be required on any online form that I add this field to. So maybe I'm tracking attributes on an online form. I want my constituents to fill it out for some reason. It will be required before they can submit. So keep that in mind. At the moment, that's how required is working. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Because I've picked one of the options from a list, it's going to prompt me to create new values. So I'm going to go ahead and create some new values. I want one to be parent. I'm going to create another value for volunteer. Can you tell I've done this one a few times? Got a couple examples here. Let's see, parent, volunteer, maybe it's prospect. Maybe you choose to keep this type of field separate. Up to you. Let's see if there's anything off the top of my head here that I can think of. Oh, how about like board member, something like that. Oops. All right, so I've created a few values here as an example. Like I said, you can have just a few. You can have as many as you'd like. Whatever you might need, you can add those there. You can also always come back later and add additional values, deactivate values you no longer need, or delete values you've never used. So you can keep that in mind as well. And I'm all finished, so I'm going to go ahead and click Save. So it saved my field now under my additional information category. From here, I'll show you kind of how this comes full circle in a moment, but another thing I like to point out about this page is at any time I can now kind of categorize this field. So if I want to categorize this under general info or membership info, I can drag and drop that and it will resave in that order. At that time I could then come in and delete this category if I don't want to use it any longer. Or maybe I want to reorder some other fields I already have. The other option is I can, there it goes. The other option is I can reorder my categories. So not only can I reorder my fields within their category or into a new category, I can reorder the entire category into a different order. So I could drag and drop additional information to the top and membership info underneath that if I want. And this is the order these fields will show up on the profile page. So keep that in mind. If you find later maybe it's not organized with your most frequently used custom fields at the top, you can always do that for a little bit easier data entry. Now to bring this full circle, I'm going to show you where you'll see this. So we're going to go to Emma Stone's account today and use her account as an example. Now don't get excited. This isn't her real phone number or address. So don't take any notes there, but it's a great example. So let's go ahead and click on that profile tab and scroll down a little bit. So at the top, you're going to see all the default information that Bloomerang already has in here for you, all the fields that you can add in or add data into by default. Now if we scroll down, you'll see additional information is what's starting out my custom fields. So that's a common thing that you'll see for all custom fields. The default info that Bloomerang already provides for you is going to be at the top, and underneath that is where your custom fields will kind of be sitting. So you can reorder these categories you'll see or your fields, so keep that in mind. And then from here, if I scroll down, you'll see I've only filled out one custom field for Emma Stone. The number of puppies she has, probably not accurate, but that's okay. If I scroll up to the top and I click Edit, I'll be able to edit any of those fields. So if we keep on scrolling, we can see our attributes custom field here. Because it's a pick because it's a pick multiple, it will be listed in this format, and I can select as many or as few fields and values as I'd like. But while we're here, I'd like to point out a few additional custom fields. So that I've created in the past, some membership info, general info, etc. So this one I can tell is a pick one value because it's giving me the option to do a drop down. But when I select my value, it's only going to allow me to select one and it will close my listing. So I can come in here and change it, but it's always only going to let me select one. Next, this is an example of a month, day, year field. So I can click either on the calendar to select my date, or I can type in my date myself. So whatever I want to do. Member since is a type it in field, so I can type it in. Roles is another pick one from a list field. You can see number of puppies I've had is a type it in number field. Event sponsor is a pick one from a list field, or sorry, pick multiple. I keep mixing those up. So pick multiple always is going to look like this, kind of like a list that I can see all my values for and select as many as I'd like. Pick one's always going to be this drop down where it shows me all my values, but I can only select one. So sorry, I keep mixing those up for some reason. If we scroll down, you'll see some additional examples of type it in, pick one, pick multiple fields. So to bring this kind of full circle again, all constituent-based custom fields is what we were just looking at will be on the profile page. So you'll be able to go to any constituent account and view those on the profile page and then save them based on any changes you make. If I save them, I'll be able to come down here, see my attributes that I added, change my membership type, the date, the number of puppies, things like that. So you can always come in here and customize those, but you'll be able to find the constituent-based custom fields on the profile page. Next, we're going to look at transaction-based custom fields. Now, like I said before, a few things are very similar in Bloomerang, which makes it nice. So things like green versus gray means required versus optional. Same in Bloomerang, blue means active, gray means inactive. So you'll see a lot of similar things. So same with custom fields, they're all set up the same way. You'll have the same options. You'll create a new category for transaction, interaction, and note custom fields. You'll see I only have one category at the moment for events. All of my custom fields that are active and my one inactive. I can click under my category to create a new field, and I'll be provided the same exact options I was given in my constituent-based fields. Now the difference is where this data is being housed. So I like to kind of just skim over these and show you a few examples of things I've made because the setup is the same. So I can set up any of my fields here, but the difference is if I go to Emma's account, because these are transaction-based custom fields, they're going to be housed on transaction screens. So things like new donation, new pledge, etc. So if I go to a new donation on Emma's account, I scroll past, remember the default information will be on the top, I scroll past all of that and I will see my custom field category and all of my fields that are active below that. So we've got things like golfer email 1, golfer in 1 name, registration type for events, table number, ticket quantity if you've sold tickets. There are a number of transaction-based custom fields you can create. So whatever makes sense for your organization. Sometimes people like to have deposit date or things like that if you're tracking 2 different dates. Up to you, whatever you need to create there. But the thing to note here is that transaction-based fields will show up on transaction pages. And each time you create a new one, those custom fields will reappear. So if I fill out this, let's say it's a $10 ticket, select my fund. I'll say it was cash. I will leave these blank. Let's select registration type. Maybe I can't attend and I just wanted to make a donation. I'm going to go ahead and save this. I'll see my donation here with my information I filled out. Cannot attend as my registration type. Then if I come back up here and create a new donation, I will see that these fields are available to fill out again because it's a new donation, so the fields might be different this time for what I need to enter in them. So that's the difference between constituent versus transaction, interaction, and note. They will show you those same fields each time you enter a new transaction, interaction, or note so that you can kind of fill out the fields according to whatever you're entering. Next, interaction-based custom fields. Very similar. The setup is completely the same. This time I'm tracking volunteer info. We find that a lot of people choose to use interaction fields for tracking volunteer. Each time somebody volunteers and their hours and things like that, maybe what activity they did. I can always come in here, remember, and add additional values. If, for example, I have volunteer activities, if I have a few additional activities I need to add to my list as options, I could come in and add those as a new value. Back to Emma's account, we can create a new interaction to see these specific custom fields. Default fields at the top, my volunteer custom fields at the bottom, my pick multiple field here, my pick one from a list here, and my type it in for number here so I can enter the number of hours. We do have a volunteer activity form, so you may, we also have great help documentation on how to set that type of thing up if you have a lot of volunteers and you want to set up a form so they can track their volunteer hours and things like that. Each time they fill out that form, as long as you have your custom fields and things set up correctly, it will create a new interaction with the activity they've done and the number of hours and maybe any other fields you've created for your form. The last type of custom field is note-based custom fields. Same as before. I know I'm a broken record here. The setup looks the same. Remember, I can always deactivate, add values, things like that. One thing this does bring up, though, is once I set a custom field, so for example, for this one, I've selected text, and as a pick one value from a list, I cannot change this field to be a pick multiple or a type it in. Once you set up your custom field to be a certain type, it's going to stay that way. So you'll either need to create a new one, or that's kind of your only option. Create a new one or deactivate it if this one's not appropriate, and either transfer that info or just use a new one moving forward and deactivate your old one. So kind of whatever you need to do there. Just keep in mind once you select your type, you can't change the type. You can only change the name, whether it's required or active, and add or delete values depending on if they've been used or not. Now if we go to a new note, oops, let's go to Emma's account here, and we create a new note from the drop down here. Default fields at the top, and my custom fields down at the bottom here. This isn't a very unique category, so please excuse that. But you can see my other fields here. Now, a pretty frequently used note-based custom field is for grant tracking. So if you track or would like to track grants in Bloomerang, we do have a class and help document about all of the custom fields we would recommend you set up. You can go through those and figure out which ones work for your organization. Maybe you need all of them, maybe you only need some of them, depending on what you want to track. So that's what I have set up here in my demo account. In my notes custom fields are all of my grant fields. So things like ask amount, you can see that I haven't typed anything in here, but it shows me that it is a currency-based type it in field. Pick one from a list for these two here. Type it in for a date, another currency field, and a few additional date fields. I also have prospect management info set up in my notes section. It's kind of up to you how you'd like to track that info. I have it here in notes, but you could always set it up as constituent-based custom fields depending on what information you want to track about your prospects. So you can see a few additional examples here. That's kind of, let's see. That's kind of all I wanted to cover about custom fields, I think. If you have any specific questions about custom fields, please let me know. I kind of skim over them decently fast because the setup is the same, and I could go over a ton of examples. So if you have any specific, or if you find yourself wanting to track something in particular, but you can't figure out the best way to do that in Bloomerang, feel free to utilize our support team. We'd be more than happy to help walk you through maybe what your options are and what would be best for your setup. Now, I know we're a few minutes over here, so I do apologize, but quickly I'm just going to touch on 3 different final settings here. The last, I guess third to last here is relationships. So in Bloomerang, we allow you to create relationships between constituents. You can do that on the if you go to the constituent account, it's a couple tabs over from the profile tab, you'll see one for relationships. We have a bunch of default relationships already built in, but you may find that we don't have all of the ones you're looking for. In that case, you can go to Settings, Relationships, and then select New. Looks really similar to the Funds and Appeals page. You just enter the name of that relationship you want to create, and it will show up next time you are going to create a relationship between 2 constituents. You can also come in here to manage any existing roles that you have that you may not be using actively. second to last here is email settings. So first is email interests. In Bloomerang, we create 3 default interests for event, newsletter, and volunteer information. So you'll always see those 3. You can always come in and create new email interests. Maybe you want one for acknowledgement receipts or whatever the case might be, letters. You can create those new email interests here so your constituents have the option to either opt in or opt out of those email interests. And it allows you and allows your constituents to ensure that they're only receiving the emails they'd like to receive from your organization and that you're honoring those wishes from your constituents. You can also come in here and deactivate any or rename them depending on if you find one is better suited for a different name, things like that. The behavior is going to be the same on the right-hand side of the page and same for new. It looks the same as other areas of Bloomerang, so it will look familiar to you based on our other settings we've gone over today. Lastly, on the emails is deliverability settings. So I mentioned at the very beginning of our class today about organization settings, pulling this information to help with sending reputation and email deliverability, just to verify that you're a real organization, you're not a spammer, and you're not sending spam and junk to your constituents. So it's going to pull the information from your organization settings. It's in a second kind of glance to be able to make sure you've got the accurate, most accurate info in here so that when it puts it in the footer of your email, your constituents have the most accurate info to reach you. And lastly, website integration. Now this is a pretty big section of Bloomerang, but we have a whole separate class specifically on forms, so that's why we don't talk a lot about it today. Online forms, whether that's donation, event registration, email sign up, volunteer activity, constituent information. We have forms for all of those. The 2 transaction-based forms where you would need an integrated processor like Stripe, BluePay, or Moolah would be our online giving form and our event registration form. The other forms are constituent or interaction-based, and so they're going to create interactions, don't require payment or anything else. We also have an option for website visits, so if you'd like a way to be able to track your website visits on your website, you can add a link or a script there to track that information in Bloomerang. Lastly, form settings is the area where you can add in your fraud prevention tools. So you go in here, you'll be able to see, you can set up IP rate limiting and Google reCAPTCHA to make sure that you're not getting hit with spam and fraud. Sometimes people like to use easy to submit forms to test credit cards, so those settings will help you stay safe in that regard. Thank you all so much. Thank you for your great questions, and I hope to see you again soon, either in a Bloomerang Academy class or through the support line. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.